Welcome everyone, and Fiona and I are here talking to Jane McAllister, and Jane is the director, producer of a film that's called To See Ourselves, and it's about the 2014 referendum campaign, and then it's about Jane's dad and his activities in that referendum campaign.
The world is waiting to learn if the United Kingdom will remain united or if the Scots have voted for independence.
What question would you like me to try and answer tonight? Fear, debt, poverty, and ill health. And it has to change. It really has to change, and this is our opportunity to change it.
Why would Scotland want to do that? We are better together.
Next time you hear better together, ask yourself this: better together for whom?
You can't even cover the whole of this street in 2 months with the amount of activists you've got.
We need to have RSVP. We need to have people getting a grip here.
Jane, how do you describe the film? Where did the notion for it come from?
There wasn't much of a notion to begin with. I didn't really plan it. I was helping out my dad and his friend who had decided they were going to make little videos in the lead up to the vote, and they were getting about 6 likes on Facebook, and I was kind of standing there. I had a very basic camera and I had a new baby. Well, she was about 8 months, and I was kind of looking to get back into filmmaking a little bit, so I said I'll help out. And then, putting a radio mic on my dad and following him, ostensibly just to record meetings. But the thing that I found was so interesting in the meetings, I was obviously interested in the speakers and the content of the meetings, but it was the before and the after. My dad, he's slightly chaotic as a person and really passionate, but him getting a meeting together is kind of something to behold. And then the kind of aftermath is when you've got a radio mic on someone and you're just privy to these conversations, and they're amazing. My dad's very good at speaking to people, and you're kind of eavesdropping in a way, and it's fascinating. And so a lot of the work that I have done in the past, I like observational footage. Your ideal situation is that people are forgetting that you're there and you're shooting from a distance. So that just gives a real truthful sense to the footage, and it just kind of escalated. I just went to more and more meetings, and then I would follow him around the doors, and just opened my eyes to how much work he was putting in.
Oh. He was a counsellor as well.
He was a counsellor as well. Yeah. So he was. Yeah. He was only a counsellor for that period. He was voted in. It was suggested that he stand, and he accepted it just for the referendum to give himself a better platform to speak. And then he stood down after it. But he loved doing it. So I got this unique access into the grassroots campaign, which was what he was an activist first and foremost, but also his council activities. During that summer, it was the Musselburgh Festival, which, weirdly enough, so every councillor in East Lothian and Musselburgh gets an opportunity to be the provost of the town. And my dad had requested that year. So he was the provost. He got up, he was getting to do speeches and stuff. They weren't supposed to be political, but he would always manage to shoehorn something in. So when you're asking maybe the sort of the process of making it, a lot of footage, too much footage because of this lack of plan. Because of just filming on the hoof, and then having another baby immediately after the filming process, so that she came the day after I stopped filming. It was just mental. And then so very, very slowly looking at this footage, and I had 1 day a week to work initially for the first 2 years, and I didn't have any budget. And so you have to watch everything, and you kind of have to transcribe everything. I hand transcribed the whole lot, hundreds of hours. And I kind of enjoyed that process, because that's when you start to see the threads, and that's when you start to realise what you've captured, the themes. Yeah. So it's totally fascinating, and there's not really a shortcut for it. So it's very, very time consuming.
What are your hopes for it?
I mean, at some point it's probably just going to be released online or a DVD or something. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I would love for it to get abroad. I'd love for it to get on the telly. I'd love for it to get onto Netflix or something. I don't know. I mean, it's such a long journey to try and get distribution for this, and to try and not just release it and expect, well, there's going to be some people that are interested in independence that will watch this. Trying to give it another place in culture.
When I watched the clip, I was quite interested, thinking, who primarily are you aiming it at? Because it seemed to me it could either be like a history of what happened in 2014 in a perspective, perhaps for people who weren't there, who didn't live through it, or is it more of a contemporary thing and it's actually partly a campaigning tool for our current endeavours? Who's your audience?
It's funny because I was really trying for it not to think of an audience. I was trying to, like, especially with the long version, trying to all the time just trying to be truthful to what I was seeing in the footage. Maybe looking at how my dad became an activist and what motivates him, and actually weaving in, I suppose, what I could see was his kind of holding of this ideal of social change, democracy for Scotland, and then how, like, every day just trips him up, like just trying to do things, trying to reach that goal is a struggle, because when you try to achieve anything that grand, like, day-to-day life just holds you back sometimes. And it was like trying to weave in the domestic life that he had at home and how tricky it was for my mum.
Yeah, there's a little glimpse of that in the trailer, isn't there, when your mum sort of saying about how he's out all the time and he's doing this, he's doing that, actually. And I saw that little bit and thought, I bet my husband thinks that sometimes about me.
Your dad's been out canvassing most nights of the week. Saturdays at stalls, every single Saturday. I feel like a personal assistant.
Are you a socialist? Are you a socialist? Are you still a socialist?
I'm part of the United Kingdom and I'll stay very well part of it.
Right, do you want to fight? And the next one I'll be successful.
So you're filming at a little bit of a distance, but you're picking up conversations. It's not exactly a fly on the wall, but it's a little bit like that, isn't it? And you wouldn't have known what you were going to pick up at all, actually, when that was happening.
It's not like reality TV where you've got a massive budget and you get microphones everywhere and you can get so many things. You're limited to the interactions that are coming through Dad, my father, and that's actually a decision that I had to make quite early on in the filmmaking process. Like, I found out that I was pregnant again, and the baby was due a week after the vote, and I thought I can't actually do this film, so I stopped filming, and then I kind of felt, I don't know, things were just seemed to be like, so it seemed so historical, and I sort of crept back in a little bit, but then I felt it was overwhelming. I was like, how can I tell this whole story? It's too big. And then when I realised that if I just told it through this one person's experience, then it would be manageable for me, but it would also have a clarity that would kind of have a kind of universal quality, I think, because people understand human stories, they understand a personal journey.
Yeah,
it's very emotional, even just the clip. I mean, just watching it, because you know the outcome, you know that there's heartbreak awaiting for this man, and you're watching it, and I could feel my stomach kind of tightening. So I thought, oh no, he's going to get such a letdown. Which, that emotional story, you're right, because it's focused through an individual that you can relate to, is very powerful.
And I guess, given the outcome of the referendum, it was always going to end up in that spot, wasn't it? But the other thing that occurred to me was my personal kind of experience included I'm in Glasgow. You know what Glaswegians are like. We talk to complete strangers at the drop of a hat. And, you'd be sitting on a bus and a complete stranger would then turn and say, well, have you made your mind up yet about how you're going to vote? And suddenly you're in this conversation, and they could be quite in-depth conversations, even although, you never knew when the other person was going to get off the next stop or not. And that kind of thing, if I think back to it, that kind of interaction to me it's almost magical somewhere. It was just kind of like it evoked a sort of spirit that was part of that campaign. Feeling I haven't seen the whole film, so we're going on what we have seen. What struck me was that there are a whole decade's worth of people who, from 2014 to now, who couldn't vote then and who can vote now, and they have no experience, or probably very little experience of that. Certainly if they were at the younger end of it, they won't have any experience of that. And an honest portrayal of what happened when your dad going round and just the family dynamics and everything, that could be really valuable to tell people. I think that's got, I think that's one place for it.
Terrify them, couldn't it? The idea what they're up against.
Well, I am hoping that there's some of the positive magical moments in the film as well.
There's loads of the positive magical moments. And you're absolutely right, that experience you're talking about on the bus, that's what was really exciting about the time, and why it was such, in lots of ways, an easy filmmaking process, because as soon as you had a camera on the street, people were just coming up, right, and saying their piece.
The Scots would get up off their knees.
Their knees were on their bellies.
I think we're going to shake up the world. I really do.
Britain, Great Britain, what does it stand for?
Everyone was expected to have an opinion, and they formed it, and they used whatever stats. I mean, the thing that I always laughed at is everyone had their favourite stat that they would just come out with, and whichever way they were going to go, they got passionate about it, and they got excited about the fact that it mattered, what they thought, and they were interested. Conversations on economics, on the EU, just happening in the street. Yeah. It was totally unique. And I think that's what happens when it's a healthy society, when people are engaged in politics. I do think that should be more normal. I think we need to go back to that.
It's very difficult when you look at the tone of the debate now compared to, I think, in 2014, although people had opinions, it seemed to me that people were much more open to either listen to somebody else's point of view and perhaps change their opinion as they went along. Whereas now, the number of people genuinely undecided, I think, is probably quite small. And it's much harder to have that conversation. But is there anything that you've sort of learned through this process of doing your film that you think can feed into the new campaign? What do you think worked? What do you think we could take forward?
I think there were real strengths in the campaign in terms of activists had actual feet on the ground, and they had people willing to go around the streets, whereas the No campaign didn't. So the No campaign had a lot more money, and they were using the phones, and they were using post, but they were using the postman to deliver, and people were out in the streets delivering themselves. Now that is such hard work, but it might be the only thing we've got above. That really going, and the conversation, everyone says the conversation on the doors, I do think it is the one, because people don't get that many visitors anymore, and people that are coming to your door, like Amazon delivery drivers who are in a rush, or somebody come and read your gas. Whereas if you go around and actually are open just to have a nice chat with people, I think they appreciate it.
We always make a point, if you're out leafleting and somebody's working in their garden or cutting their hedge or washing their car or whatever, always stop and chat to them, even if it's just about the weather. I've never had anybody who said, get off my lawn or anything. They've always been happy to engage. And they might have said, who's your leaflet for? And we'll say independence. And they might say, oh, not for me, dear. But they'll still be nice about it because you kind of had that interaction first. Yeah. But the human touch is our weapon, really. I mean, one thing that really intrigued me from, I think it was maybe in one of your earlier emails with us, where you said you don't do socials. And I thought, how can you possibly manage without doing socials nowadays?
Personally, I'm not, I'm on Facebook, but I don't post. But I've got people to help me with this campaign.
Right.
To do social media, because I could, I mean, obviously we would get nowhere without it. And I'm creating a lot of the content and then disseminating it to some colleagues who are putting it out on the platforms. It's so much work. This crowdfunding campaign, I didn't really expect it to be. Yeah,
the team that you've been doing that for, I mean, they've certainly come up with some. They've garnered interest in it. I mean, you've featured quite a lot. There was the stuff in the National and then on with John Drummond the other night. I see posts being shared quite a lot around Facebook and around Yes Groups on Facebook. So it's certainly, being picked up. Do you think that's going to be enough to get it funded?
Do you know what? Today we're at 60, I think about 66%. Maybe. So it's gone. It's jumped.
That's jumped a lot, because when I looked at it probably last week, it wasn't that much. That's great.
That's really good.
It took a massive leap. We've had a couple of big donations. We had the Indie Live broadcast last night.
Yep.
And also, Creative Scotland have come in with some money.
Nice.
Oh.
They've got a fund which is like in partnership with Kickstarter. It's called Future Forward or something like that.
Yeah.
And you applied when you launched your campaign. Like, people are looking at it, and Kickstarter can see that it's been shared. I think there's something like 41,000 views on Twitter or something like that.
Which is, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So Kickstarter made it a project that we love, and then Creative Scotland came in with some money. So it's amazing.
What kind of response have you had then in general when you've contacted people? Has everybody been up for helping? Have you found some sections more willing to open the door to a newcomer with an idea than you have others?
Yeah, I mean, loads of people have been so helpful in terms of, individuals that I've reached out to, like Leslie Riddick, for example, has been such a great supporter for quite a long time, actually, because I worked alone on this for so long. Then when I was trying to make it into the feature film, and she helped me when I thought maybe the feature film could be 3 hours and 15 minutes. And she was like, no, that's not feature length. But she's watched a bit, couple of cuts, and she's been so helpful. So Pat Kane as well has been amazing and promoted it. There's certain places where you would have expected a little bit more and it's not come. I don't know, it's really hard to tell. I think sometimes people need to see something being successful before they join it.
I was wondering if the fact it was on an independent subject, if that was actually closing doors, because people will put a political label on that they wouldn't put on an anti-independence movie.
I know. I mean, it's really tricky because I honestly, I wish that I hadn't had to do the crowdfunder. I wish that it had professionally, been funded in a professional way, which would have been through Screen Scotland, or it would have had like a broadcast interest from the BBC. But the BBC told me that they would have to have an equivalent observational film made by a union supporter about a union family, to have the absolute balance.
Just madness, isn't it? This sort of their definition of balance is so restrictive to everybody. I mean, everything else that they put out, I would argue, is the opposite. From their sort of unionist perspective, it's appalling.
So what are the next steps then? Let's be optimistic and imagine that you've got up to the full amount that you need to take it forward. What happens next?
We need to go into post-production. So I need to be absolutely certain that it's picture lock, which having watched it recently, I know there's some changes that I want to make. There's always changes. It's like painting the fourth road bridge, rail bridge, whatever. People say it's just like you get to the end and then you want to go back again. But I need to stop. But that'll be a last sort of pass. And then we have to go back into the post-production house and do some final mix and some colour work. And then, so we've got some screenings lined up actually for September. We've got Eden Court. So we wanted to do north, south, east and west and a central belt premiere. So we've got them lined up. Eden Court in the north. We've got hopefully the DCA in the east, so it's not confirmed yet.
Oh, we were there a couple of weeks ago. That's a lovely venue. Yeah,
that's a really nice
amazing
venue.
If we go for it. I mean, if they don't go for it on their programme, we can hire it. And then we've got Oban Phoenix that are taking it on. So that's like a lovely community cinema. And the Robert Burns Centre in Dumfries. We're hoping for the GFT. I mean, I can't...
I was just sitting here thinking, that's the kind of thing the GFT might do.
Yeah, we're really hopeful. We are in discussions. I've got a distribution producer who's working on that. So we wanted to really concentrate on making them really good screenings and having these debates afterwards, because that's the main thing that we've got from people watching it, that they need a conversation afterwards, because it's quite full on. As I say, there is joy. You see this lovely this atmosphere. It's inspiring in lots of ways, but obviously you do know I couldn't change the ending. But there is, as much as I wanted to,
as much as we would love to.
I mean, I really believed I was filming this transforming of her. I mean, I was as much, I was in the bubble, as much as people were. But I would say that there's an uplift at the end. Obviously, I have the baby, and my dad continues to campaign. And I think most people's reaction is as sad as it is, that it's quite galvanizing, because it makes them feel like, I want to get out. I want it. We were so close, and it was the right cause, and we have to, and it's going to take work. And
oh, we'll know what it's like to be frightened.
So that kind of like sense of like, what do we do now? So yeah, having a discussion. I mean, I would love to have people from kind of both sides, if you want to call sides of the debate, and we will try for that. And if we can't get somebody from the other side, what we're thinking of doing, what I would like to do, is to go like to the town a couple of days before, and like there's a wee sort of tiny theme in the film where I speak to people on benches, and I'd quite like just to ask like film people and ask them if they would give a question for the panel, especially if they're on the other side, and then project that onto the back for the Q&A, and to try and create that slightly different dynamic where it's not just like everyone who's singing from the same hymn sheet, which I think was something that I saw during the campaign in the meetings, which took a lot of work to get these meetings going and to get all the speakers. And my dad would like to spend so much time with the PA system and everything, and then getting them the leaflets around the door. And then they would say, how many undecideds are there in the room? And about 2 people would put up their hand,
Yeah. I was just wondering, if foreign press might pick up on it. And partly that's in my mind because Fiona and I were at a meeting the other week over in Edinburgh, and one of the speakers on the panel is a French journalist who's based in Scotland. I just thought, wow, do you think there's any chance that could get picked up? Because sometimes, I mean, that might not change any minds in Scotland, but it doesn't do us any harm if there's some really good material, and it sounds like it is good material, that can also get a bit of use elsewhere. Canada, New Zealand,
America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we really would love it to get an international screening in a film festival, and that's something that we're going to try for as well. So it was in a market in Switzerland a few weeks ago. So it was in a festival called Visions du Real. It was in the market, as a kind of rough cut, ostensibly. And I met with a few film festival organisers, like there's a festival in South Korea, and they were really interested, and that wouldn't be until February that they would have their festival. A lot of these film festivals abroad, they're okay with you having domestic screenings as long as it's not been online. Now, we do have like an online premiere planned, but one night. So in the Kickstarter, there's a reward that you can, it's £10 and you get your ticket for that online premiere. And there'll be a Q&A after it as well. But then it'll be offline, and then it'll be sort of out to other cinemas, like beyond what we've organised, the 5, and open to them to take it on. And then also the next tier will be open to community groups. But in the meantime, we'll be applying to film festivals abroad and hopefully having some kind of international attention. I mean, it's along like every film festival to apply. It's between £50 to £80, per film festival. It's so expensive. So this is another reason why we're just getting that budget together.
If only we had a film festival somewhere in Scotland.
Well, this is a wee issue because I have applied, and it's not that for whatever reason, but the Edinburgh Film Festival's coming up, and I'm hopeful because I understood this year they were only accepting projects, submissions from Scottish-based productions.
Right.
And I had to tick a box: are you Scottish based? Are you native Scot or Scottish born or something? And is the film about Scotland? So I was very chuffed to be able to tick all the boxes and kind of hope that somehow, I don't know, it's a tricky one because it's been resistance. There has been resistance because people prejudge it, and I would honestly say, as much as it's coming from a certain perspective, following an activist on the yes side. It really has, there's so many different voices in it, and it really is, I think it's complex and nuanced enough. Yeah. It's definitely not propaganda, and I could have done that. Yeah. And I would stand by it that it's a valid story to tell. I don't think it's going to change anyone's minds. I think it will potentially open their minds a little bit to arguments from, and I think it will, I've said this before, and I think it will humanise the campaign for people that don't really feel like independence is a threatening thing, feel like it's the way it's been portrayed as this nationalistic, I don't know, something that seems scary. Change is scary to people, but I think if people watch this film and understand the route and have empathy for the journey that somebody's taken to come to the conclusions they've come to, and the amount of hard work they did, and also that emotion of when it was lost, I think that can only be a good thing for somebody who's unsure about voting for independence or who voted no.
It's a film done from a particular angle with a particular thread through it, from a particular side, but all those voices are in it. I want to know how your mum and dad are feeling about it, and what do they think about it all now?
I mean, they just want it to be over for me because it's been so long. Yeah, my dad first and foremost wants me to feel like I'm satisfied with the film, and that it's done what I believed that it could do, or it's had its life. Also, he is an activist. He's still doing it, and he does see the value in the conversation that it could foster. And I think he would love to travel round with it. And if communities were wanting to have a screening, he would be the first one. That would be great. Yeah, he would be the. I
think they'd expect him to be trotted out on the stage to take a bow afterwards. I'm sure they'd want to meet him.
Yeah, and he loves traveling. He loves speaking to people. I mean, my mum, on the other hand, I don't know how happy she'll be if he becomes this kind of like traveling around with this film all the time. No, I think she won't mind. My mum is just just wanting for me this to be fine,
Yeah.
What will be a success for you? What's your idea of it'll all be worth it?
No, just to have it to be validated as a piece of work of quality and not a campaigning film, and for people to say, even from the other side, well, I enjoyed that, and that maybe that's made me think. And if it sparked some conversations, and if it was, as you say, the young people who missed the 2014, if they got something out of it, and also just for me, like to feel like I can walk away and I've done everything that I can, because it's taken up so much. You can tell it's taken up so much, and I've got so many other things that I want to do and trying to do, and it's just like this thing has become, I just need to be able to feel like I've done enough and then walk away.
Yeah.
All good wishes for it, and hope that fundraiser reaches the target.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that it's just zoomed up like that recently. Actually, that must be really heartening. Yeah, and thanks for coming on and having a chat to us. I've really enjoyed it.
We'll put the link to the crowdfunder on the notes underneath this, and please share it with whoever you think would be interested.
Absolutely. Great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for giving me the chance to speak. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.